I'm your host, Chad Michael. Welcome to the podcast, the Practitioner Podcast. And we are here with Mr. Brian Macdonald, who has recently graduated from the IES Certified Training Program, and he is now an IES Certified Practitioner. And he's joining us here on this session, and he has some questions that have been presented to him that he's bringing along with him that we're going to use as topics to see if we can't get answered. And then I have some questions that have come in from the community, mostly contractors. We're going to try to do our best to answer those questions. And the questions that I have that we're going to cover in this session are essentially, number one, when should you submit your estimate to the insurance company, and how should you go about doing that process? And that's one of the most commonly asked questions that I get. And so we're going to take a deep dive into that question. And then also, secondly, what should you do as a contractor? Like I said, this is mostly for contractors, and hopefully we have some adjusters, public adjusters that are joining too, and some other people that are in the industry, but mostly we're gonna go about this from the contractor's point of view. So, we're gonna try to exhaust all options that are at the contractor level first, and then I realize that there are other avenues available, such as arbitration and appraisal, and there's public adjusters and there's litigation. I fully get that. But what we're going to cover here is what to do as a contractor to exhaust all options that are available to you at your level, at the contractor level. So that's another question that we're going to get into is when the insurance company just flat out denies it and they don't want to prove anything, what should you do? I had that specifically come in through a comment. And then we're also going to have a members only, like the last maybe 15, 20 minutes of our segment. We'll after we close this down, we'll then get into the members only segment for the IES certified members. And one of the questions that I have for that session is when the insurance company deploys an engineer, like when they assign the deal to an engineer and they're going to send an engineer out, what should you do and how should you handle that process? So we're going to take a deep dive into that subject when we get on to the members only part of the session. I want to ask, and before I continue on, you to please, wherever you're watching this, if you would please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that's where this is going to be when it's all done and edited. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. I've been putting out a lot of content there, and I'm going to continue to do so. And I just think that you're killing yourself if you're not going to get that free content there, right? And then wherever you're getting this podcast, if that's how you're consuming this content, if you're not watching, if you're listening, we are on Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and some other ones. Like anywhere you get your podcast, it's available, and it's called the Practitioner Podcast. So please, if you haven't found that, please find it, because I'm going to start putting out a ton of these sessions on a nonstop basis. If you'd like to be on the show, please send me a request and what you'd like to talk about. I'd love to have you. And then again, please send in your questions. Wherever you're watching this, please send in the questions, because I want to cover real life issues and real life topics that contractors are struggling with. And then now, Brian, before I introduce you fully or have you really introduce yourself, what topics do you have with you that you're looking to bring to the table that you wanted to cover, my friend?
What I've got here is a lot of questions. What I get when I go out to some adjuster meetings is things like what adjusters say, like, this looks like blisters, doesn't look like hail impacts. And another one I always get, everybody gets this, is that I'm not paying for ridge and starter because that's in my
that's a good
10
one.
or 15% waste factor. Do you hear that a lot?
Oh man, that's like the most commonly the most common way that they respond, right? Like, we're not paying for that. It's already included in the waste, or it's already included in the a couple ways, right? Like, you have the removal problems. It's already included in the tear off, right? And then the replacement, it's already included in the way. Anyway, go ahead.
And a lot of contractors that I I have talked to, they are still from the old school sense, and they still want to send in their estimates after the build. So a lot of supplementing.
Sure.
That's what I hear a lot.
Good. Yeah. So, and let's jump into that. So first, tell us what you do. Like tell us what your role is in the industry. What you do for a living, and describe your service, and also your YouTube channel. Brian has a new YouTube channel, and I believe that it's going to be bigger than mine one day. So tell us about that.
Thank you, Chad.
What do you do,
It'll
Brian?
It'll never be as big as yours, Chad. But
Shoot, I'm
what
small
I do,
town.
I'm following into my mentor's footsteps. I do inspections, literally inspections, estimates, and supplements. Boots on the ground inspections. I go out to my contractors' jobs, and I literally do a detailed damage report with hundreds of photos, go around the property, look at all of the damages from either the hail, the windstorm, or the hurricane that came through, or the flooding, and document everything that these field adjusters have missed. Not just because they're being, untrained or they're bad people. It's just the way they are. They blow through these claims, as many as possible, just to write up an estimate, an initial estimate. So what I do is I go behind them basically and document and identify what damage they have missed on the claim for my contractor. And I go back to my office, I write up an estimate, a detailed estimate, Xactimate estimate, the same software that most insurance companies use still today. And what I do after that, I put all of those documentations plus my estimate plus all of those hundreds of photos that I've taken from the job, and then I'll also look up for that jurisdiction of that area in whichever state, city, county that the job is in. I'll look up all of the codes for that jurisdiction for each particular scope of work that we need to follow and the contractor needs to get from the insurance company paid for. And that's what I do.
Awesome. So it would be fair to say that you're a damage consultant, like you're an independent consultant. And from what I understand, you don't deal with policy or coverage or any of that. You just work and assist contractors get the correct documentation. So the boots on the ground, inspections, documenting the damages that are there, photographing it. I see you have a drone there, getting the drone footage. And does that include just the roofs only, or what do you do? What does it include when you go to a property?
When I go to a property, if it has exterior damage, I will fly my drone over the property, look at all of the extensive damage, detailed damage of the roof, all of the elevations. Sometimes some of our contractors, they like to have me create a 3D model of the exterior of the structure, either a residential home or a commercial property, after the hurricane or hailstorm, so that they have exactly what the damage looks like. So we send that information. We can transfer that data into Xactimate sketch for exterior siding contractors and estimators, so they don't have to spend all of that time building out and sketching out an elevation. They can take that data and transfer it to them, and Xactimate will build a sketch in all of the exact quantities of what needs to be done for windows, siding, roofing, etc.
Awesome, man.
It's fun.
Yeah,
I love doing it.
for sure.
I'm passionate about it.
Awesome. I can tell, and I know you are too. Like I've been watching a bunch of your videos, and I know that I saw a video, and here's a plug for your YouTube channel. And how do you find your YouTube channel, brother?
You can find my YouTube channel at Inspections, Estimates, Supplements.
So you literally named your business
That's right.
the exact inspections, estimates, and supplements because that best describes what you do, right?
Exactly.
And so if you search for inspections, estimates, supplements, you have a channel by that name. It's got a little drone logo there, and I'll put a plug in. I'll put a link to the description and as many places as I can where this video is going to be. So when you're I saw one of your YouTube videos, and I think you had it on Facebook too, where you had a couple of travelers adjusters and you filmed the whole thing. So you got to go see that on his channel. Awesome video, raw video of him there. I don't think they knew that they were being filmed at the time, but they were giving you some problems over some of these things, like some of the vents and pipe jacks and things, and you were giving them problems right back. It was pretty entertaining. So I love the way I love the way you did that, man. We got to do more of that stuff where we film the actual real life situation. So, and I try to do that as much as possible, because I think people it's the best way they can really learn is if they see you doing it, like in action, actually doing it. All right, so I want to jump into that first topic if we could. So, and that to revisit that. It's basically, when should I submit my estimate, right? And when I do that, how should I go about doing that? Essentially, this is where, and just like you said, this is where I see a lot of the biggest problems with contractors is, they come to me after they've already built the job, after all the work is all done, and it's been sitting in some file forever. And really what they need to do is get the depreciation released, right? And so they have to invoice for it. And so while they're at it, they want to see if they can, supplement it to get more money on it. And that's when they bring it to me. And just, for anybody watching this, don't call me. If you're at that stage, if you want a little bit of advice or something, that's great. I've got some videos on the subject, but don't call me for that service at that point. I'm not interested in the job. Because that's not how you do things. You do not want to supplement the job only after it's been done. I do expect that you'll still be working on some supplementing, like you'll still be handling some of the supplementing aspects after the job is done for sure. You will have to invoice for the job, but that's not when you want to bring the problems and the differences to the insurance company attention. You want to do that definitely before the build. Right? And so I think to put this into perspective, we need to first figure out what is the role of the contractor in relation to working on an insurance project, right? So if a contractor is working on a project that's being paid for by an insurance claim, what is the role of the contractor in that situation, like in that scenario? And so I would submit to you that the number one role of the contractor, like the job of the contractor, and if you were to put it on a contract form like the ones we have in our course, Brian, the role is really nothing more than the contractor has been hired to perform all repairs that have been prescribed or that ultimately gets prescribed by the insurance claim, right? That's the job of the contractor. The role, so let me repeat that. The contractor's role is to perform all repairs that have been prescribed or that will be prescribed by the insurance claim itself, okay? So, if the insurance claim says that we've got to make repairs to the roof, and that's all it says, then our objective should be to go about following those prescriptions, following that instruction list, if you will, right? And so in the course of going about trying to follow that prescription, if we then discover that the shingle or the tile, whatever it may be, has been discontinued, or that the decking is water soaked and is not up to code, or that there are violations of the International Energy Conservation Code, whatever it is that blocks us, that stops us from making those repairs legally, with good contractor standards, then we've got to then go back to the insurance company and say, we've got a problem. We can't, follow your prescription because we've run into a roadblock. And then I think together with the insurance company, what should we do to, together with your help, I'm sure we can solve this, Mr. Adjuster, Miss Adjuster. That's kind of the approach I take almost all of the time. So, if you don't just go and build the whole roof and decide for yourself that the roof now meets certain thresholds, that repairs not possible, and so it now must be replaced. You don't just go and make that judgment call on your own and then send the bill to the insurance company later. Like, guys and gals, if you're frustrated by this game, and because you're getting pushback from the insurance company and they're kicking your tail, if you're doing it that way, that's one of the biggest reasons for it. I mean, you first and foremost, you've got just about on any insurance cover letter, on the estimate breakdown, it says, we reserve the right to inspect, in some kind of lingo or another, however it's worded differently on all these things. But they basically say that they have the right to inspect or to review prices and estimates before the work is performed, right? And so, one of the things is you might be absolutely correct in your judgment that it couldn't be repaired and that it had to be replaced. And so you just made a judgment call and you went and started replacing it. And then you sent them the bill with documentation. You might actually be right with all of your conclusions, right? But unfortunately, you've given them the ammunition, you've given them the leverage to shut you down, before they pay another dime, if they so choose. I have bailed some guys out of this before and gotten them a better situation, after they've already finished it, and they're like, hey, could you help? Could you just update the pricing on this estimate and send them a couple little extra things? We have the photos, and I've done that in the past, and I've gotten good results. But usually it's because the adjuster was giving courtesy, was really doing something that they didn't really have to do. So I think, if you follow that line of thinking overall in almost all situations, now with the exception of mitigation, I get it, okay? So I actually don't recommend approaching the insurance company with your mitigation needs ahead of time. I recommend going ahead with the mitigation. Now, if you're a roofer on here, and that's you do mostly exterior work, this actually applies to you too, because we're talking about tarping and maybe board up. That might come into play for you. I do, if you're going to tarp the roof, that's technically a mitigation item, okay? So I actually don't think that you should wait to get permission from the insurance company. And I think that, if we're talking about hail or significant hurricane damage here, not, other than just minor repair areas, like isolated areas, but mostly the whole roof has been compromised, then I actually think that you should tarp the roof 100%. Why? I mean, the Xactimate has pricing per square foot. And if you look at those prices, and you're talking about remove and replace, not just install, because you actually have to take the tarp off too before you do the roof. So you're talking about remove and replace, add in steep, on and off. If you're putting down lumber around the perimeter to tuck the tarp over and around, put in the lumber, install, remove, and replace. High charge, if it's after hours, that's anything outside of Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's considered after hours. Put that in the estimate. We're talking about an Xactimate estimate here. And I would put that into an Xactimate estimate. I would have the client sign an emergency services work authorization form, and I would put it together with like an invoice cover sheet, like from QuickBooks, Common, or even Word, like just any invoice. and invoice them for the amount that's in that estimate and send it to them, right? With the form that the client signed, that they hired you, right? And so in that form, by the way, it's in our course, but it's also, you can generate that through Xactimate. There's a bunch of admin forms that you can actually generate an emergency services authorization form already with your letterhead already on it, with the client's info on it. And so that's a standard industry form. So that's the form I would use. I would get that form, have the client sign it, put it together with the Xactimate estimate for all those things I just told you about, with a bunch of photos proving exactly, number one, why it was necessary, and number two, all the work you did, along with an invoice cover sheet, and I would send it to them. That's a bill. That's an invoice. Pay the bill. And usually with mitigation, you can actually get them to get the check sent directly to the contractor. That's not usually the case with reconstruction. I know that there are AOCs out there, AOBs. That's assignment of claims, assignment of benefits. That's a separate topic. That's not something we're going to cover here. I do want to keep those topics though for another session though. I do want to get into those. We'll get into that in the next podcast. I do want to talk about those. So it's not for, any of those other, we're just talking about mitigation items only. And you can get the check sent to you a lot of times, maybe from the mortgage company. If the mortgage company gets involved and you go through that process with them and get the insurance, or the insured to sign a letter of authorization, giving you authorization to deal directly with the mortgage company, and you submit whatever it is that the mortgage company requires of you, which probably includes a W-9, then a lot of times you can get the mortgage company to send the check to you and the client, and some of them even to you directly. Other than that, you're not going to get insurance companies too many times, unless you're a preferred vendor, to send you payments directly, circumventing the client on reconstruction jobs. That's not going to happen. So mitigation jobs, yes, like water dryouts and water restoration, perhaps even content like packing, storing, and handling, and then your tarping and things like that, then you can get them to send the check directly to you. But those are the only times that I would actually just go do the work and bill the insurance company. In any other circumstance, I would wait for them to apply coverage and then see what they're going to give. In other words, I would not, this is one of the questions too that goes along with this, is should I meet the adjuster out there with the estimate ready? The answer is no, most of the time. Okay, there are exceptions to that rule, but my general quick answer to that is no. Okay, and I know there are other people out there that teach otherwise and contrary to this, and God bless them, more power to them. But allow me to explain and elaborate, and then let you make your own determination. Okay, and I had this come up in Panama City just a few weeks ago, where it was a half a $1,000,000 job, which was where my estimate was basically at. And I already had a copy of the first adjuster estimate that was like $150 some odd thousand. It wasn't very much. It was way, way, way off. After my inspection, boots on the ground like Brian does, I went there, did detailed boots on the ground inspection, drone footage. I inspected every room, closet, and hallway of the property, the front elevation, right elevation, rear elevation, left elevation, all other structures, and I identified a ton of damage, more than what was on, this was Hurricane Michael, by the way, than what was on the initial insurance estimate. And my take where I was approximately at was about $500,000. Now, instead of submitting that estimate to the insurance company, which sometimes is the right move, I waited, got the first estimate from the insurance company. So waited for them to apply coverage and write an estimate for as much as they were willing to write an estimate. And by the way, that was before my involvement. So I didn't even have the opportunity to go there, do the walkthrough with them at the time. So that was before my involvement. But they came up with $150,000, reviewed the estimate, came up with my own version, along with probably 1,000 photos altogether. And there's probably like 40 or so rooms in the property. And instead of submitting the estimate to the insurance company in this particular case, because I knew it was so far off, I wanted to take it seriously. So I just generated a photo report from the Xactimate estimate. So it saw the cover letter. It showed that it was in Xactimate format, sort of giving them the heads up that I have the ability to put it in an Xactimate estimate. That's what I'm using, right? But we're not getting to that yet. I just want to show you the photos to prove to you that we are so far off. And so, like, we can get into the estimate if you want to, but we have some serious problems. And so really what we're asking for is for you to send somebody out here who knows what they're doing and take another look at this thing, right? So that was our way of asking for a reinspect. Now, had we sent that estimate in, I can tell you what would happen. They would, assign it out for a reinspect. That's what they would do, and we will have shown our cards for no reason. So in this particular case, and sometimes they'll say, well, send us an estimate before we do a reinspect, and you have no choice. I get that. But if you do have an option, try to hold your estimate back for as long as possible. Do not meet him out there with the estimate. So they sent another adjuster out there. I went out and met the adjuster, and the adjuster, one of the first things he said was, do you have an estimate? And I said, well, I do. I have been working on one, and I can get you an estimate, but you have to understand, an estimate for what? I don't know what it is that you guys are approving to give you an estimate on. And the reason why I say that, sir, is because we've been hired as the contractor to perform all repairs that have been prescribed by the insurance claim. That's our job, right? And so we took a look at the initial insurance adjuster estimate, and there's just no way that the job can be done with the scope of work that he has. So for example, in the kitchen, it has to be completely rewired. It's completely gutted by the mitigation company before our involvement. And, so in order to do the job and get permits, we're going to have to rewire it. That's a big, huge difference there, right? The original adjuster has to remove and replace just standard crown molding, but this crown molding is not like, 2¼ inch or 3¼ inch. It's like 6½ inches with multiple pieces, right? There's paneling all over the wall, and he's got drywall and paint. There's high-end premium grade oak flooring, and he has standard grade hardwood flooring. So there's a lot of differences, and I just really need to know what it is that you guys are going to approve before I know what to include in the estimate before we even get to that point, right? So I was hoping that you and I could get together and do a walkthrough and agree together on what are the things here that we need to be putting into this estimate, and then I'll get you an estimate from that point. And it went really well, and that's what we did. And then the next thing I want to know, and as part of the strategy, is the adjuster using Xactimate? Because if the adjuster is using Xactimate, so am I. Let me do the adjuster's work for them as much as they'll allow me to. Like, let me give them the ESX data file that they can plug in and put their own letterhead on it and make my work their work. Like, they don't have to do the hours and days worth of work on this job to come up with the totals, right? Now, they can keep me honest and push back in items where they think it might be excessive in their eyes. That's great. But the thing that's going to happen is usually like the DMO versus RFG, DMO versus INS, DMO versus DRY, those things that you've heard about, DMO versus FCC, flooring, DMO versus FRM, framing, DMO versus CARP-MECH, which is mechanic carpentry, right? Those are things that all have to be dealt with and changed from the DMO when you're doing the removal. You've probably heard about this topic. One of the easiest ways to get them to approve that is to give them the data file where you've written it like that, and they plug it into their own, and they never even catch it in the first place.
Wow. Yeah, that is a big question, too, that I hear a lot about DMO versus RFG, and how can we overcome that with a lot of insurance adjusters. And some adjusters catch it when you give them the inside adjuster your estimate. Some don't, but I know that's a big fight that a lot of contractors are having. I've also had adjusters tell me that the question question that we had brought up earlier about blisters. Now, there has been a lot of roofs out there that are old, 3-tab shingles, architectural shingles,
Sure.
that adjusters will come up and say, well, that looks like blisters. And I've had conversations with them to have even their manager come out, and a lot of these adjusters come from different states. So from like the DFW, they come out to the East Coast, to where a lot of the hail is a lot smaller than what you would see out in the DFW.
Sure.
And their manager would tell them that, yes, that there still could be damage with smaller hail. Just because it's 3-inch size hail, sometimes 2.5-inch size hail, and it doesn't make holes in the roof, it still can be damaged.
And so how do you deal with that?
By the way that we deal with that mostly is we pick an area on the roof, all of the main slopes, the 4 directional slopes. We do a 10 foot by 10 foot square test, and we will identify at least anywhere between 8 to 15 hail impacts, to where on a 3-tab shingle, if the seal has been broken, but mostly it'll be soft around the impact area of the shingle. Now, you don't want to break a seal. A lot of adjusters will ask you to break the seal to see if the matting underneath is cracked, but the manufacturer state that that will void any warranty and downgrade the lifetime of a shingle if you break the seal, so we don't like to do that. You'll also see about anywhere from 40 to 60% of the granules of the impact of the hail, the granules will be embedded into the matting of the tar of the shingle tab. That's a good indication that it is a hail impact. That a lot of times what you'll see a true blistering effect will be that you'll see insufficient attic ventilation on roofs, that a lot of times in the summertime, the heat, it just bakes that shingle. And in that cold space of the attic, if it's not ventilated properly, it'll actually cook like a microwave.
Sure.
And the heat will superheat the shingle and cause the shingle to actually pop off the granules. Like, it'll sound like popcorn kernels in a microwave. And it'll actually expose the fiberglass matting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not an insurable claim.
Well, let me ask you a question. You're right on, right? Let me ask you a question. What if the roof blistered and then got hit by hail?
That's a good thing. That is a great thing for the homeowner, because it will still get approved for replacement.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's direct physical loss, right? And again, I think, kind of getting into policy areas there, right? But to me, I don't get caught up in if they say, yeah, I mean, see, adjusters, that's one of the things that they do, and engineers, which we're going to get into, right, is that they try to focus on all the things that are working against you for approval, right? I mean, so like incorrect installation, right? Like it was installed improperly, and so that's why it's showing damage over here. Or it has mechanical damage, right? Or you can see where it's already been previously repaired, right? Some of these things it didn't have proper ventilation, which, by the way, it should have proper ventilation, right? Like you should make sure it has proper ventilation when you're replacing the roof, which is actually required by code. And if they have code upgrade coverage, OL coverage in the policy, you could actually get the insurance company to pay for it. So there's no reason that you shouldn't be doing proper ventilation on these roof replacement jobs, right? But that's what they do. They point out all of the issues that are working against you, right? And then use that to justify and why they're going to deny coverage, ignoring the biggest, most important, most crucial fact that there is, which is there's hail, right? Like there's hail damage. Like I remember a guy on a flat roof. I was looking at him. I was standing. He wouldn't let me get up there with him, and I was standing down on the ground looking at him, and I was like, "What do you got up there?" And he's like, "Well, I see that there's like 10 different layers and duct tape and patched and all that stuff." I was like, "Oh yeah, no kidding, crazy man. I'll tell you what, that's wild. Do you see any hail damage anywhere?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I see hail damage. I'm not real sure which layer it's on." Okay, great. You see hail, right? Oh, okay, great. Can you take pictures of that? Like that's all I care about. That's coverage. You know what I mean? Like, do you hear you, right? So, if I'm out there chalking up damage on a roof and I see some of that stuff, if I see mechanical damage where somebody dragged something along the roof and you can see it's kind of consistent, then I'll probably put some triangles around that and put some circles, or vice versa, and put some circles around actual hail damage, and then discuss and explain that, oh yeah, I saw all kinds of damage. I saw mechanical damage. I saw, improper installation. I saw all this stuff, but here's all the hail. That should be all you need. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And a lot of how we overcome that issue with an adjuster saying that they try to get out of it because they say that it was installed improperly is, well, unfortunately, that is true, but your homeowner, your policyholder, has been covered by you with an agreement of this policy for over 20 years. So, and this roof's been on for 25 years. So you guys should have done if you would have done your due diligence and would have noticed that it was installed improperly, then you need to refund the last 20 years of premium for that.
Man, that's exactly my point, right? Like you hit the nail on the head. Is do you hear you, right? So you can point out how bad it was, but why'd you insure it then? That's not my problem. You insured it, so it's not even relevant to the conversation whatsoever. It's not even relevant. But I let him get it out there. Just let him get it out there,
Yeah. I wanted to say also too, whenever I meet my adjusters out there and we have conversations about coverage, or they want to talk about negotiating coverage or policy, and I expressly let them know, well, hey, I'm just a contractor out here, and I'm going to stay in my lane. I can't talk about policy or coverage, but what I can talk about is how we're going to put this build back together. I can talk about scope of work. I can talk about code issues for this jurisdiction. And when I explain that to my adjusters, the mood and the professionalism just goes to another level.
Sure.
It makes it so much easier to work with these adjusters, because they've got a job too. And I feel like if you're more diplomatic and not automatically just fight with these adjusters, you get more, what do they call it? More honey with bees. Is that right?
More flies with honey.
Yeah, more flies with honey
than with bees, right?
Yeah,
dude.
I love it.
You said the magic word, diplomat, right? Like you want to be a diplomat. You want to be diplomatic. And I think one of the things, if you remember, we covered in the training, which is, what makes these adjusters do what they do, right? Like, are they all just out to screw you over? Are they all just out to... I got to tell you that, that adjuster on the $500,000 deal, which, by the way, today he sent me a deal. He's at $426. So, and we haven't even gotten the windows and doors in there. So we'll probably get to $600. It's going amazing. That was the guy that didn't... that wanted to know if I had the estimate, right? He's one of the best adjusters I've worked with. It's been incredible. And let me continue with that story too, by the way. Like he said, do you have the estimate? No, I want to find out what's going to get approved first. And then I just gently nudged him throughout the process, but it wasn't listen, if you guys are out there saying, you have to pay for this, you have to do this and you got to do this, and you're kind of giving a condescending tone to the adjusters. I mean, Brian, you may even want to back down a little bit from that one of those earlier. You probably already have from those earlier ones when you were out there with those guys, man. You were a little rough on those cats, man. That's why I know these guys are going to like to watch that, because he was a little rough on those two adjusters. But to be fair, they were a little rough on you, right? Coming out there and double teaming you. But I just think,
I
like,
what you want. Chad, I found out from learning, and I'm not an expert. I'm learning every day. And
sure,
what I
me
found
too,
out
brother.
with this type of adjusting company from this insurance carrier is that they don't have field.
Oh,
adjusters.
you can name them, dude. Because I.
You can name them, okay.
If you want to name them, I don't care, man. Yeah, it's Travelers.
Travelers Insurance.
And you all be careful with Travelers, man. You got to be careful with them.
Traditional insurance adjusting firm. They actually have their adjusters are on. I believe they're on salary.
Yeah.
And they don't have an inside adjuster and a field adjuster. Their adjuster owns that claim from start to finish.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. Unless you're in a cat type situation, there are exceptions to that. But yeah, you usually have to deal with that staff Travelers adjuster. And you got to be careful. Like if you're gonna put on an estimate for like chimney cap and flue cap and things like that, and then you don't do that work. Like I've actually seen guys, 2 or 3 different occasions. I've had clients who have had visitors from like an investigator at Travelers that showed up because they heard that the chimney cap wasn't installed and they billed for the chimney cap. And we're talking like $300-400 here, $300-400 problem here, and they're sending out investigators unannounced to their office. So that should give you an indication that they're fully willing to fight over the small stuff.
Oh, they are. I'm glad you brought that point up, Chad, because we've had some information that actually Travelers, for all these contractors out there, you best be sure whatever you are asking for approval on a scope of work, line item scope of work, you better be doing it. If they approve it, they are coming back after the build and doing a check on a reinspection. They're coming out to your job to see if you actually did it.
And
if you didn't do it, they are clawing back money from the contractors.
Man, and you know what I would do, brother? If I were you and any other contractor out there, I would go about every job with every insurance company as if they were Travelers. That's what I would do. I mean, I wouldn't see, man, if you make it an overall policy to always be doing things above board, like if it's on the report, it's got to be done, then you're not going to have to worry about these things at all. Like if you go almost overboard and making it policy. So in other words, like you're going to get guys that are going to come up to you during the job and they'll be like, hey, boss, I know that it says here that we have to detach and reset the ceiling fan, but I could save you money, boss. Like we could mask and tape that and go around it and you'll never know the difference. It'll all look the same. Okay, yeah, no, I'm sure you can because I know you're the best of the best. But nope. Take it out and put it back in. You know what I mean? Because that's what it says. So like everybody working for you needs to know. One way to make that a little easier, if you want to print out the scope report after you have your estimate complete that is being done according to that estimate, instead of printing out the estimate version of the Xactimate estimate, there's a file called the scope report. And you could print that out where it just shows item by item that's getting done without the dollar figures. So if that helps you, like with your subs and with your crews, to make sure that literally every item's got to get checked off exactly. I mean, and look, I think there's a lot of people, most contractors out there are actually guilty in the sense where you think about it, doesn't that include, like if they said remove the shingles and felt, doesn't that mean the felt has to be removed? Doesn't that mean that if you build them for it, you know what I mean? Like the felt actually has to be removed. There's guys that are leaving the felt in place and going over top of it, and some, the argument, oh no, it's better protection, which it's not. It's not better protection. And also I try to convince them for a number of different reasons, which is one, you need to go down to the deck so that you can inspect the decking and to make sure it's up to code, right? To make sure it's a solid, nailable sheathing, to make sure it's not water soaked, to make sure it's thick enough.
Following the manufacturer's code
Absolutely.
for re-roofing.
There you go. There you go.
Have to go back down, all the way down, strip it down to the decking.
Right, there you go. And if that's not good enough, hey, the insurance company's paying for it, and you're telling them that you did it. So if you're not going to do it, then you need to tell them that you didn't do it so that they can take that item out. You know what I mean?
That's right.
But so like I think, getting back, I think there's a lot of adjusters where, look, they're professionals just like you and me. They have a job to do. They have families. I refuse to believe that in my 20 years of experience, I still do not believe that most adjusters just don't care about the client, that they just want to screw them over, that they're out to pay them as little as possible, that it's a war where it's them versus the insured or the contractors. I think that there are certainly a few oddballs and a few bad apples that would qualify as that. But the vast majority, that's not what their aims are. Most of the time, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get the claim closed. When a new adjuster becomes an adjuster and they learn how to do their job and they learn how to do a proper estimate through Xactimate, and then they get their first assignment, like in a cat storm or something like that, which is usually where their first deal comes from, then they're in there trying to write the perfect estimate and they're trying to do everything the way they learn, and they send it in, and then it gets sent back. Like, oh no, we don't just offer up O&P, for example. We don't just give them that. We don't have any removal items on there. Take all those off, right? And so you got to redo this. You got to redo this. This is way too much. And so what they find is now not only did it get kicked back down and the claim didn't get closed, most of the time they're an independent, so meaning they didn't get paid on the job while all that was happening, right? So you have to understand that the adjuster, if it gets kicked back down by their superiors, that almost always, depending on the company and all that, the setup, almost always that means their own check has been affected. Their own payment is on the line, right? And so they eventually learn that it's not necessarily diligence and thoroughness, because there's a process in place for supplementing things. They're told, hey, we have people in place. We can do cleanup after you. Just get it done. Right? Write it up, get it closed up, get it done. Get them a check, get them a payment, because there's that pressure too to issue a payment to the client within so many days, depending on the state, their rules and laws. And so they're carriers from a top-down level perspective that don't want to get fined so much money per day because they didn't issue payment. And also another thing, I'm a little cynical in this way. I will allow myself to be cynical here. I do believe that from a top-down level, a lot of these carriers try to hurry that process before the Xactimate price list changes. After a big, huge storm, that price, that local market is going to go way up. So they try to get adjusters out there to quickly issue payment based on the way the price list was before it changed, right? And so they try to get it done that way. So now the other thing too is that you're getting resistance and pushback, a lot of you guys out there, because you're sending your estimate to the field adjuster. No, that's not what you want to do. Now, in the case where Brian was talking about how Travelers owns that file all the way throughout, you're probably not going to have a choice in the matter. You're probably going to have to deal with the same adjuster, right? Nationwide is another. There are a few other carriers out there where you're going to have to deal with the same adjuster from start to finish, right? But mainly, like your run-of-the-mill, like State Farm, Allstate, man, a lot of them. I'm dealing with that one in particular, Tower Hill, USAA,
USA.
Yeah, Liberty Mutual, Safeco, which I don't like them as much, but the general thing is that, in a CAT environment, they're sending out independent field adjusters who are there first, write up the first estimate, and then they're gone. And when that payment is issued to the insured, then the adjuster gets paid and they're off of the file. Like, they're in some other state somewhere, or they're back home, right? Like, and so a lot of times, like, man, I can't get the adjuster to respond to me. Well, who are you sending it to? I'm sending it to the adjuster I met. No, right? Or I'm getting pushed back from the adjuster, like they're screaming at me, right? That's because they're mad because you mess with their money. Hold on a second, we'll check the questions.
Yep. And back to the traveler's adjuster. I've heard it, and you'll if you watch my video on YouTube channel on that reinspection of travelers, what they told me is that well, we do 20 claims a month, but none of our other contractors, they don't say anything about this. They're not asking for any of this stuff to replace the flashing, to replace the hip and ridge cap shingle, to replace the HVAC B vent flashing cap. None of that. So that they were talking to me like it was Greek to them, which I knew was a bunch of baloney. And you know what it boils down to also on the contractor side, why you guys are getting so much pushback from travelers and some other these hard carriers. They just beat you up, is because there are what we call chuck in the truck contractors that don't ask for these items, you know, flashing, pipe boots, hip and ridge cap shingles, starter shingles, weight, the accurate waste factors, drip edge, valley metal, ice and water shield in the valleys. Hey, none of that. So when we're shooting ourselves in the foot, a lot of times when you get these chuck in the truck contractors that are not educated, either they're not educated or they just don't want to take the time to supplement it correctly, or to hire somebody like my company to help them get what they need and what they deserve to do the job right.
Sure.
So that they can do the job with a warranty that they should offer for their customers.
Agreed. Agreed. 100%, man.
I see a question from Alex Gonzalez. He says, he asked, can we supplement for a permit, harnesses, a generator, supervision hours, and caulking?
Good question. So,
Very good question.
yeah, great question. So, I want to take this point to talk about one quick thing, though, right? And Brian, you and I have talked about this before. Okay, so along this line, I didn't hear this in the question, which is good. I didn't hear, should you be putting in OSHA and listing out, you know, OSHA requires this and putting in, and I didn't hear like temporary toilets and things like that. I'm assuming like an average residential style job, supervision hours, right? And so look, you got to understand that if we're not talking about doing an appraisal style deal here, or litigation, or a public adjuster, or AOCs, AOBs, again, we're just sticking with our concept that we've been talking about, which is to exhaust all options that are available at the contractor level and getting your work done and getting your results and winning within that lane, right? If that's what you're choosing to do, which I'm a strong advocate of. And I think, Brian, you are too, right? Because I think your time frame, you know, is much, much faster to get to the result. And if you know what you're doing, you can still get top dollar for getting there, right? So for that reason, I think that if you go in there and you have notes on there for like OSHA, temporary toilet, supervision hours for an average job, in addition to the overhead and profit, I think then you stick out like a sore thumb, and the adjuster sees you coming and they're like, oh, it's one of those guys. Like, oh, they have to use HVAC technicians in order to remove and replace the vent caps on the roof. And if they don't, they could go to jail because of this. I get all that. That may be true. It is true that you have to follow every single OSHA requirement. So don't get it twisted. I'm not saying that you shouldn't follow OSHA, right? I'm just saying that when you start billing for or itemizing OSHA references and things like that, you tend to fall into the category, and whether right or not, I'm just telling you, this is the results. This is based on, I'm a numbers guy. Then the adjuster's like, you're one of those guys. So you tend to lose a little bit of credibility, right? So what I would do instead, maybe you do need a generator and put it in there, right? Maybe you do need a temporary toilet for some kind of reason. But if the client has a toilet inside and it's just a house, don't put it on there. They're going to laugh you out, right? Don't put in big cranes on stuff you don't need it on there. Instead, I'm an advocate of focusing on the building codes and on what's required in the building codes and on actually doing a proper, thorough, detailed inspection and discovering all the damage and all the consequential items that are going to be necessary in order to do the job, right? So all the little details that are typically missed even by the people who are using the OSHA stuff and by PAs and the AOC, AOB. I think even those people are missing some of the items that I'm talking about, the nickel and dime stuff, the items that you don't run into as much resistance for, right? And so to answer your, I hope I've answered that. Let's see, what do you say, generator? If you need a generator, I don't see much wrong with that. But they're going to give you some pushback on the generator, but I don't see much wrong with that, putting it in the general items or general conditions section where a dumpster may go. You said, okay, so like the harnesses, right? Harnesses, I don't have a problem with putting in the harnesses, but I think if you're putting in, a lot of times the adjusters are missing, if it's a steep charge or high charge, they may address it and you think, okay, well, they've got it in there, right? But look to see, did they put remove steep charge and then replace steep charge with waste? That's the way it should look, okay? So, and then remove high charge, replace high charge with waste. Remove shingles, replace shingles with waste, right? And then also use the RFG versus DMO with no references to it. The only way you're going to get those to slip through these days is if they miss it, like if they're using your ESX file with the example that I used earlier, or if they're just going to pay based on your estimate, right? They might not catch it then. Unless they really do the estimate themselves, item for item, they wouldn't catch it, right? But that's what I would do is write it up that way as I'm sitting. And what was the other part of that? Let's see. Harnesses. So I try to stay away from the harness. Yeah, I try to stay away from the harnesses if I could. I mean, because you're just inviting them to say, oh, send us pictures of them with the harnesses. Because they'll try that, even if you put the steep and high. Which, by the way, always make sure they use harnesses and always take pictures of them. They try to shut you down with that, but there should be no reason to shut you down on that because, again, we've submitted the estimate before the build, so that issue came up before the build, right? And then we now know what they didn't approve, right? We gave them the estimate. They got back to us and said, we approve all these extra items, but we're not going to approve these items, like steep and high, right? Unless you give us photos during the build. Okay, hey. Genius. Now we know we've got to definitely have a bunch of pictures so there's no way we're going to miss that, where they catch you up as they ask you after the fact and you didn't get them during the build, so you should know that, they don't want to pay for the pipe jacks and vent caps and chimney flashing and this and that, even though you had it on the estimate and you brought it to them before the build and they said, why do you have that? Well, it's required by code. Why is it required by code? Well, I sent you the adoptions page where the city of such and such has adopted the 2015 version of the International Residential Code. Did I not? Okay, well, in the International Residential Code, it says that all flashing must be replaced where rusted, damaged, and deteriorated, right? And all of the flashing that I have in my estimate, the reason why it needs replaced, it's all damaged. How did it get damaged? Because it was installed with nails and it has holes. And I can prove it, right? And so if they say, oh, we don't think that's necessary, the only thing I could think that you would get shut down before the build is if you didn't have good enough pictures, right? And so now they didn't approve it. So you're not agreeing, okay, we're not going to do the flashing. Never agree to that. Instead, you're saying, all right, Mr. Adjuster, Miss Adjuster, I'm willing to withhold these items from the estimate at this time, okay, because my job is to do whatever is prescribed by the insurance claim, okay? Right now, you're prescribing for me to do this roof without replacing all these flashing, even though I know that the codes require it. So I'm going to try to do it your way, right? But I'm withholding it from the estimate at this time. As long as you're willing, I'm willing to do that. As long as you're willing to revisit this issue when it's no longer a hypothetical and it's an actual, and we're there actually swinging hammers, and we can show you more photos at that time of what we're actually going through at that time. And so that's another reason why you should be sending your estimate in before the build, okay, getting any differences worked out, putting a spotlight on the items they didn't agree to approve at that time. You're not withholding, you're not like foregoing or forfeiting those items. You're just putting them on a shelf, putting a spotlight on those items during the build, and then coming back to them with an amended estimate with all items that you might have agreed to take off the estimate, keep those off, but reintroduce the items that you agreed to set aside until it was no longer a hypothetical and it was an actual, right? And that's how I do. I mean, in our course and in my other videos, there's really miles and miles and miles of ground to cover on this topic, and from a lot of different angles. Every job's different. Every scenario is unique, right? So it's kind of hard to put a general strategy to a one-size-fits-all, because I don't believe you can do that. I believe that you have to go about this as being a counterpuncher. You do not just rush and give them their estimate. You wait to see their cards and see what they have to show you, and then respond accordingly depending on the move that they made. So if you play chess, you may have a bunch of different opening moves that you use for chess with your pawns or whatever, where I like to start this way, right? And then if they do this, then I'll do this. If they do this, then I'll do that. Like 3-4 different scenarios, right? But you really don't truly know which strategy is going to take hold until you see their move, right? So let them make their move, then you be a counterpuncher, and then take it from there. And then Brian, give me some closing thoughts before we wrap up this main session, and then we'll go into members only on that note.
Well, another thing back to the harness question, just one little thing, is that now there are some insurance carriers that will actually hold back the seat charges.
Mm-hmm. Paid when incurred, PWI, right?
Yep. And they'll PWI it. They'll say, hey, I need a picture of you with a harness on the roof, tearing off the shingles and putting on the shingles, the new shingles, with your harnesses. But okay, we could do that. So we just take pictures of it on the build and send it to the inside adjuster or the adjuster, whichever it may be, and that they release that depreciation.
And lock them in, right? Lock them into their story. Right. You know what I mean? Right. Lock them into their story, man.
Yep. Record all conversations. Record all video recordings.
Hey, careful with that, and make sure that the state you're in, you can do two-party recordings without their consent. Right. I about got myself caught up because I was about ready to film a whole deal with an adjuster in the wrong state without thinking about it. Man, I wish I could have got that content. It was so awesome, dude. It was so awesome.
Yeah, but, I know. But even and we don't record. Video record and phone call record just to say, hey, I got you.
Sure.
Nothing like that. Mainly it's actually what I use it for, and I'm sure you do too, is to go back and take notes. There's so much information that goes on that you got to recall on an inspection. Mm-hmm. However, it may be a residential inspection or a commercial inspection. Heck, just the notes alone. It's really good to have those conversations recorded.
I agree.
So that you could keep yourself honest. And if you got a question, hey, look, I know we discussed this, but this has come up here. What can we do about this? What do you think?
100%.
Kind of situation. So
it's like
speeds up the process.
I agree. I think you got to be careful because it's like you don't want to anytime you go to somebody and say, hey, you remember when you said such and such? I can prove it. I got you recorded. You're just looking for, you're just looking for, a confrontation at that point. Nobody's going to be happy about that, right? So, yeah, you got to go about it carefully like you were talking about, man. But anyway, hey, listen, we're going to close up this main session here. So for you guys that are listening on the podcast and watching this on YouTube, I really appreciate you watching and making it this far. Like, I'm gonna try to work on keeping these shorter because I know that everybody's time is so precious, and you don't have all the time in the world to just sit around all day and be on live streams and watching stuff like this. And I want to make sure that we try to give you the value with the time that's there, and I feel like we've done that. But I am gonna try. I want to encourage you to keep watching, and I am gonna try to keep it, an hour or less, and try to figure out how to do that. You know what I mean? But anyway,
it's a work in progress.
It is.
It's a work in progress.
Follow Brian Macdonald. Find Brian Macdonald on Facebook. I'm going to link to his YouTube channel. If you need a damage consultant, if you're a contractor and you need somebody that comes and there's a lot of virtual estimating companies out there, and God bless those companies. That's how I started, was a virtual estimating company. But this is the real deal on the next level when you're really doing the boots on the ground inspection. I know that firsthand. That's what I do. I don't do anything virtual anymore. I require that I'm actually there, and I discover so many more dollars when I get there. Forget about the estimate. It really is. I mean, so I don't believe that the virtual estimating model, coming from one of the guys that started it, has flaws. It has a major weakness if you're not doing boots on the ground. And I'm just going to shoot that out there, and you can take it however you want it. To all of you virtual estimating companies, I love you. I love you. And I want you to keep doing what you're doing, and I hope you're doing a good job. But I'm just telling you, your model, that's where it's flawed. That's where it's flawed, is that this guy is doing boots on the ground damage inspections, and he knows what he's doing. So find Brian Macdonald, find his YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, and wherever you're watching this, comment. Let me know what you think about it below. If it's Facebook, if it's Instagram, if it's YouTube, please, 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 please comment. I need to know what you think so that I know how to keep going with this. And I am going to do many more episodes, so I need some questions from you guys. And then I did not jam down your throat with IEScertified.com this whole time with our training course, and that's intentional. I wanted to give you real life strategies and tactics that, for free, and just give it to you, right? I want to give you value more on a way more proportion than I'm asking you for something, right? But I wouldn't be doing justice if I didn't give you a small little hook. So, IEScertified.com.
That's sign up. You're going to learn a lot from Chad. When I signed up and went through the training course of insurance restoration training, my eyes just opened up to a whole new ballgame of how to play this game. It's amazing how much value Chad puts into these videos, puts into his podcast, and he gives it all away. So I would highly, highly recommend that anybody out there go to Chad and learn what he learned.
Dude.
What he is teaching out there.
Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. Like the Facebook emoji. Thank you. That's what I'm trying to do. The praying hands, right? No, thanks a lot, man. And I'm so glad that you found that course, too, because I'm really happy to have you, man. There are a handful of really, really sharp cats in there. You're one of them. There's a lot of guys that I've been doing some extra engaging with, that have reached out to me. And so I really appreciate that, Brian. Thanks so much for taking that course and for being a part of it, man. I'm so blessed to have you as a part of it, man. I love you. God bless you. And thank you to all you guys that are watching. I really appreciate it. We're going to move into our members only next with the IES certified members. That you can find that iescertified.com. Also doing putting together a brand new website that's dedicated to this podcast, and it's not up yet. It will be probably by the time you're watching it. It's called It's called the Practitioner Podcast. So make sure .com, the practitionerpodcast.com. Gonna do frequent blogs. Gonna host the podcast there. Going to put embeds to the different episodes there. You can link to the YouTube videos there. Find my YouTube channel, Insurance Restoration Training. Find Brian's Inspections Estimates Supplements. And we'll see you there. Comment below. Please like the video. Please subscribe. Keep winning. I love you all. Keep killing it. And we'll talk at you later.
Later, guys. Peace.